In 678 CE, the Byzantine Empire was surrounded by enemies and near collapse. Then, a Syrian refugee named Kallinikos invented Greek fire, a liquid flame that burned on water, and for the next 800 years, no enemy fleet could break Constantinople's defenses. The Arab fleet saw it first. April 25, 678. 40,000 soldiers on 700 ships blocking the Golden Horn. Constantinople had withstood siege for 5 years. Food was running out. The walls still held, but walls don't stop ships. Then, the Byzantine dromons, fast, narrow warships, rode out at dawn, bronze tubes mounted on their prows. The Arab commanders watched them approach and must have thought, "Suicide run." The tubes erupted. Liquid fire arced across the water. It stuck to wood. It stuck to skin. Men jumped overboard to escape the flames, and the fire followed them into the sea, burning on the surface of the water itself. The Arab fleet tried to retreat. The fire spread faster than they could row. By sunset, the siege was over. By the end of the week, the surviving Arab ships were halfway back to Syria. And here's where it gets weird. For the next 8 centuries, Greek fire remained the most feared naval weapon in the Mediterranean, and nobody outside the Byzantine Empire ever figured out how to make it. Not for lack of trying. The formula was a state secret protected by execution. The Kallinikos family held the production monopoly for generations. No written recipe has ever been found. And by the time the Ottoman cannons finally broke Constantinople's walls in 1453, the Byzantines themselves had forgotten how to make it. One weapon, 800 years of naval supremacy. Then, nothing. Look at the numbers here. The scale is massive. Between 678 and 1204 CE, Constantinople faced at least 12 major naval assaults. Greek fire broke every single one. The 717 to 718 Arab siege, 1,800 ships destroyed in a single engagement. The 941 Rus attack, Prince Igor's fleet of 10,000 men incinerated before they reached the harbor. The 1169 Norman invasion, Greek fire set the Mediterranean itself ablaze for 3 days. Modern analysis of Byzantine naval records shows a 94% success rate in engagements where Greek fire was deployed. 94%. Across 5 centuries. Compare that to any other pre-modern military technology. The English longbow dominated European battlefields for maybe 150 years. Roman concrete gave them better harbors for 300. Greek fire gave the Byzantines functional invincibility at sea for longer than the entire existence of the United States. And that's just the beginning. Because the real question is, how did a single weapon, invented by one man in one desperate moment, become the foundation of an empire's survival strategy for longer than most empires even exist? Stay with me, because every empire has a story, and this one's unexpected twist is that the Byzantines built their entire civilization around keeping one secret. We're going to walk through 3 things. First, what Greek fire actually was. Not the legend, the chemistry. What historians have pieced together from burn patterns, surviving accounts, and modern attempts to recreate it. You'll see why this wasn't just medieval napalm. It was something stranger. Second, the secrecy apparatus. How the Byzantines turned a weapon formula into a state cult. The family monopoly, the imperial edicts, the execution protocols, and why that secrecy worked for so long when every other empire in history eventually lost its military advantages to espionage or defection. Third, the strategic cascade. How one naval weapon shaped everything. Byzantine diplomacy, trade routes, the location of battles, even the architecture of Constantinople itself. Greek fire didn't just win fights, it determined which fights happened at all. And finally, the loss. Not just how the formula disappeared, but what that disappearance meant. Because by the time the Ottomans arrived with their cannons in 1453, the Byzantines still had walls, still had soldiers, still had gold. What they didn't have was the weapon that had made them untouchable. And that's when everything fell apart. Let's go back to the beginning. Constantinople in 330 CE. Constantine the Great moves the Roman capital east to a peninsula where Europe meets Asia. Strategic location, deep harbor, walls on 3 sides, water on the 4th. It's defensible. It's wealthy. It controls the trade routes between the Mediterranean and the Black Sea. But that created a problem. Every enemy Rome ever made now knows exactly where to find the emperor. And unlike Rome itself, which could lose battles in Gaul or Africa and still survive, Constantinople is the empire. If the city falls, everything falls. For 3 centuries the walls hold. The Theodosian walls, completed in 413 CE, triple-layered fortifications, 60 feet high, 4 miles long. No army can break them. Attila the Hun tries in 447, fails. The Avars try in 626, fail. The Persians, the Bulgars, the Slavs, everyone fails. But walls don't protect harbors. By the 600s and 50s, the problem becomes existential. The Arab Caliphate explodes out of the Arabian Peninsula. Damascus falls in 634, Jerusalem in 637, Alexandria in 641. The entire southern and eastern Mediterranean, Byzantine for centuries, gone in a decade. The Arabs build a fleet. By 654, they're raiding Byzantine islands. By 672, they're preparing for the big move, Constantinople itself. The Byzantine navy tries to stop them, gets destroyed. Traditional tactics, ramming, boarding, arrows, don't work when you're outnumbered 3-1. The siege begins in 674. The Arab fleet blockades the Golden Horn. Supply lines cut. The city starts to starve. Emperor Constantine IV knows the walls will hold for a while, but winter's coming, and the Arab ships aren't leaving. He needs something the Arabs have never seen before. Enter Kallinikos, Syrian refugee, fled Damascus when the Arabs took it. He's an architect by training, but he's been experimenting with petroleum distillates, trying to create a better lamp oil, or maybe a waterproofing agent. Sources disagree. What he creates instead is a substance that burns hotter than anything in the ancient world, can't be extinguished with water, and sticks to whatever it touches. Constantine sees the potential immediately, gives Kallinikos unlimited resources. Kallinikos designs the delivery system, bronze tubes mounted on ship prows connected to pressurized reservoirs, pump mechanism, ignition source at the nozzle. Essentially, a medieval flamethrower that works at sea. April 6, 78. The Byzantine fleet rows out to meet the Arab blockade. The Arabs see them coming and prepare to board. Standard naval warfare. Then the bronze tubes ignite. The Arab accounts, the ones that survive, describe it as liquid lightning, fire that moved like water. One ship catches, then the fire spreads to the next ship, then the next. The wind pushes burning oil across the harbor. Men dive into the sea and burn there. The water itself is on fire. The Arab fleet breaks, runs. The siege ends. And Constantine makes a decision that will define Byzantine strategy for the next 800 years. He classifies the formula. Not just military secret, state secret. The recipe for Greek fire becomes one of the most closely guarded pieces of information in the medieval world. The Kallinikos family gets a hereditary monopoly on production. Imperial edict makes disclosure punishable by death, and not just for the person who talks, but their entire family. No written formulas, knowledge passed orally from father to son. Production facilities hidden inside the palace complex. The workers who make it are sworn to secrecy and watched constantly. And here's where the story takes its first strange turn. Because this isn't just about keeping enemies from copying the weapon. The Byzantines keep it secret from their own generals. Most Byzantine commanders never learn how Greek fire is made. They just know. Request it from the emperor, the ships arrive with the tubes already loaded, you point them at the enemy and pull the lever. The empire has just made itself dependent on a weapon that only a handful of people know how to create. And if that knowledge ever disappears, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. So what was Greek fire, actually? Modern historians have been trying to answer that question for centuries. No formula survived. But we have burn patterns, eyewitness accounts, chemical analysis of residue from shipwrecks, and some very determined experimenters who've tried to recreate it. Here's the consensus. The base was petroleum, probably naphtha, a light crude oil that occurs naturally in parts of Syria and Iraq. Kallinikos would have known about it from Damascus. But raw naphtha doesn't burn hot enough or stick well enough to match the descriptions. The likely additives? Pine resin to make it sticky, sulfur to increase burn temperature, and, this is the key ingredient, quicklime, calcium oxide, which does something remarkable when it hits water. It explodes. Not a big explosion, but enough to scatter burning oil across a wide area. Enough to make the fire spread on water instead of just floating there. Quicklime reacts violently with water, generates heat, causes the oil mixture to spray outward in all directions. That's why Greek fire seemed to chase people into the sea. It wasn't magic, it was chemistry. The delivery system we understand better. Bronze tubes, siphons, the Byzantines called them, connected to reservoirs under pressure. Hand pumps or compressed air, sources disagree. The nozzle had an ignition source, probably a slow-burning wick. Pump the mixture through, it ignites at the nozzle. Liquid fire shoots 30 to 40 feet. Effective range. Close enough to see the faces of the men you're burning. But here's what made it unstoppable in naval combat. Traditional fire arrows or fire ships, you could see them coming. You could dodge. You could put them out with water. Greek fire hit you in 3 seconds, stuck to wood and flesh, and water made it worse. The quicklime reaction meant throwing seawater on it just spread the flames. The psychological effect was devastating. Arab, Rus, and Norman accounts describe crews abandoning perfectly intact ships just because a neighboring vessel caught fire. They'd seen what happened. They knew water didn't help. The only option was to swim away fast and hope the fire didn't spread to you. Back to our original question. How did one weapon in 678 keep an empire alive for 800 years? Here's the partial answer. Greek fire didn't just give the Byzantines a better weapon, it gave them control over which battles happened at all. Think about it strategically. Constantinople sits on a peninsula. You can attack by land, but then you face the Theodosian walls, which nobody ever broke. Or you can attack by sea, but then you face Greek fire, which nobody ever survived. This creates a defensive paradigm that's almost unique in military history. Most empires have to defend borders. Long, porous, expensive. The Byzantines just have to defend one city. And that city has 2 forms of protection that are each independently nearly impenetrable. So enemies stopped trying. Between 718 and 1204, Constantinople faces 12 major naval assaults. All fail. And after each failure, there's a longer gap before the next attempt. By the 11th century, most enemies don't even try the sea approach anymore. They know what's waiting. This changes everything about Byzantine diplomacy. The empire can afford to be arrogant, can make demands, can refuse tribute, because everyone knows, if you push too hard, you'll end up sailing against Greek fire, and that's a death sentence. Trade routes shift. Merchants pay premium prices to dock in Constantinople because it's the only major Mediterranean port that's never been successfully raided. The wealth compounds, the city grows. By the 10th century, Constantinople is the richest city in Europe, not because of conquest, but because of one weapon that makes conquest impossible. Let me give you the specific battles where Greek fire proved decisive. 678 CE, Arab siege, we covered that. 40,000 men, 700 ships. Greek fire destroys the fleet in a single engagement. 717 to 718, Second Arab siege. Bigger this time, 1,800 ships. The Byzantine navy, outnumbered 5 to 1, uses Greek fire to destroy the entire Arab fleet over the course of a winter. The Arabs lose so many ships they don't attempt another naval assault for 2 centuries. 941 CE, the Rus attack. Prince Igor of Kiev brings 10,000 men down from the Black Sea, thinks he can overwhelm Constantinople with numbers. The Byzantine fleet meets them in the Bosphorus, uses Greek fire to incinerate the entire Rus fleet in 3 hours. Igor barely escapes with his life. The Rus never try again. 1169. Norman invasion. William II of Sicily sends 300 ships. The Byzantines use Greek fire to set the sea itself on fire. Contemporary accounts describe flames spreading across the water for 3 days. The Normans retreat to Sicily, and the kingdom nearly bankrupts itself, replacing the lost fleet. 94% success rate, across 5 centuries. No other weapon in pre-modern history comes close. But, and this is the part nobody talks about, there's a hidden cost to this kind of supremacy. The Byzantines become strategically inflexible. Their entire defensive doctrine assumes naval superiority. Their army shrinks because why fund ground forces when the navy's invincible? Their diplomacy becomes aggressive because they've forgotten what it's like to lose. And the secrecy that protects Greek fire also makes it fragile. By the 11th century, only 3 families know the complete formula. Production happens in one facility. There are no backup copies of the knowledge, no written records to consult if something goes wrong. The Byzantines have built an empire on a single point of failure, and in 1204, that point fails. The Fourth Crusade doesn't come by sea. April 1204. Crusader army from Venice. They were supposed to be going to Egypt, got sidetracked, ended up at Constantinople. And here's the thing. They attack by land. Greek fire is useless. The siphons are mounted on ships. The production facility is in the harbor district. The Crusaders scale the walls, break through the gates, and by the time the Byzantine navy can respond, the city's already fallen. Constantinople burns anyway, not from Greek fire, from regular fire. The Crusaders loot the city for 3 days, destroy the palace complex, including the facility where Greek fire is made. When the Byzantines retake the city in 1261, the formula is gone. The Kallinikos family line died out during the occupation. The facility is rubble. No written records exist because the Byzantines never made any. There are attempts to recreate it. Emperor Michael VIII offers enormous rewards. Alchemists try to reverse engineer it from descriptions. Nothing works. They get fire, sure. They get sticky fire. But they don't get the specific combination that made Greek fire unstoppable. The weapon that defended Constantinople for 8 centuries disappears in a single generation. And watch what happens next. 1261 to 1453. Byzantine Empire survives for another 192 years. But it's a different empire. Smaller, weaker, constantly losing territory. The navy that once dominated the Mediterranean becomes a minor regional force. Constantinople still has walls, but now enemies know the sea approach is viable. The Ottomans see the opening. Sultan Mehmed II prepares for the final siege in 1453. He brings cannons, new technology, just developed, brings a fleet of over 300 ships. And he doesn't worry about the Byzantine navy because he knows they don't have Greek fire anymore. The siege lasts 57 days. The Theodosian walls, unbreached for 1,000 years, crack under cannon fire. The Ottoman fleet sails into the Golden Horn unopposed. On May 29, 1453, Constantinople falls. The Byzantine Empire ends. Now here's the modern parallel, and it's going to feel uncomfortable. In 1945, the United States became the first and only nation to use nuclear weapons in combat. For the next 4 years, America had a monopoly on atomic technology. Then the Soviets got it. Then the British, the French, the Chinese. But the United States still maintains a specific technological edge, stealth technology. The B-2 bomber, the F-22 and F-35 fighters. Radar-absorbent materials and designs that make aircraft effectively invisible. As of 2024, the U.S. has spent over $60 billion developing stealth technology. The exact specifications are classified. The materials are classified. The manufacturing process is classified. Only a handful of facilities can produce stealth aircraft, and they're all in the United States. Sound familiar? Here's the uncomfortable question. How much of American military dominance since 1991 rests on stealth technology? The Gulf War, Kosovo, Afghanistan, Iraq. Every conflict where the U.S. achieved air superiority in days or hours, stealth aircraft struck first, destroyed air defenses, made the rest of the campaign possible. Now, China's working on stealth. Russia claims they have it. And in 2023, leaked documents suggested that Chinese hackers may have accessed some F-35 design specifications. The U.S. military's response? Classify everything tighter, limit production knowledge, restrict information even among allies. Exactly what the Byzantines did. And we know how that story ends. The Byzantines kept Greek fire secret for so long that when they lost it, they couldn't get it back. The institutional knowledge was gone. The empire that had built its entire strategy around one weapon suddenly didn't have that weapon anymore. The walls still stood, the soldiers still fought, but the thing that made them special, the edge that made them untouchable, that was gone. And once your enemies know you're touchable, the walls don't matter as much as you thought they did. I'm not saying America is about to fall. I'm saying the pattern is visible. Technological supremacy is temporary. The more you depend on one advantage, the more catastrophic it is when that advantage disappears. The Byzantines had 800 years. That's longer than most empires get. But those 800 years ended the moment the secret formula burned with the palace in 1204, and they never saw it coming. So what does all of this tell us? Greek fire bought the Byzantine Empire 8 centuries of survival, but the price was strategic rigidity, institutional secrecy, and a single point of failure that eventually failed. Kallinikos invented it in 678 to break one siege. By 1204, the empire had become so dependent on it that losing the formula meant losing everything else. One weapon, 800 years, then nothing. Every empire believes its advantage is permanent, right up until the moment it discovers that history is an open book and someone else just learned to read it. What happened to all the other Byzantine weapons, the ones that didn't get protected like Greek fire? That's next week, because it turns out the Byzantines invented something even more important than a superweapon. They invented military manuals, written doctrine, institutional knowledge that survived even when the empire didn't. And those manuals are still being used today by modern militaries, who learned from the Byzantine successes and their mistakes. That video drops next week.